Hey, this is Alix, founder of Subtext Radio.
This is Subtext.
Please go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps us to reach new audiences and promote the artists that we work with. Hit like and hit subscribe.
Contemporary Oneironauts is an episode created and produced in 2021 by Alix de la Chapelle for Subtext Radio at the invitation of Annabelle Lacroix, with the help of the Art of Social Change podcast. Oneironauts is the archive of a research in progress on contemporary dream perspectives. It is a receptacle for the voices of those who navigate nocturnal territories and images. Through conversations with artists, sound pieces, theories, and texts, we explore what the dream can teach us in 2021. We discuss the value of this liminal space as a critical and poetic thought, as a threshold and passageway, as an agency, an experience which allows us to forge knowledge and power. This podcast is an invitation to a deep dive into the dream world. Countless dream theories since the dawn of humanity prove the interest of human beings in this physiological process, which has been defined in many ways depending on the observer. However, my curiosity bumped against the lack of interest in the Western world when it comes to dreams, still commonly associated with a superfluous mental production. In comparison, this cognitive process had been given a much greater place in the sociocultural fabric of other cultures. The COVID pandemic and the resurgence of interest in nocturnal life at a moment of suspension of what seemed like a normal reality made me want to collect some of the contemporary approaches to that space. Although there has been millenary interest in the dream content, source, nature, and function throughout history, this process still remains partly unintelligible. To me, it articulates all that constitutes the human experience. A universal yet individual process, it takes hold of the bodily perceptions and social interactions of our organism with its surroundings. Each night, it decomposes, structures, and gives meaning to experiences through an elaborate manipulation of emotions and visuals, which we render through language and concepts. As the word dream has become a standardized motto for advertising, bordering on alienation, I wanted to recenter the focus on those who study what the dream really is. This episode is a subjective receptacle. It aims at approaching the dream as a nodal point in the articulation between world and interiority, to investigate its value as a place where the subject can at the same time turn over the lining of time and sew itself into the matter of the living. So what do today's artists and thinkers tell us about the value of dreams? What can it tell us on our collective experiences in times of crisis? What can be learned today from an object that blurs forms and categories into a fluid matter, that materializes the porosity between human, non-human, between the real and the virtual? To answer all these questions, I wanted to offer a polyphonic vision of an object which still resists definitions. We will enter the work, practices, and texts of some Oneironauts, meaning those who navigate the dream world, those who have explored what this physiological process offered to think the times and the forms of the world, whether in creative, therapeutic, or political dimensions. Among these contemporary Oneironauts are the scientists and theorists from various disciplines who examine the very mechanism of dreaming, and those who practice the dream as part of the cultural or therapeutic tradition who open us to other cosmogonies. Among them are also artists. They draw inspiration from the nocturnal experience of subjects. These artworks form the receptacle of a material of dreams which Jean Starobinski called the already dreamed. Enjoy listening. From an etymological standpoint, the word dream in English seems to appear in the 13th century, derived from the Old Norse drarm. In 2015, the French sociologist Bernard Lahire defined dreams as an involuntary psychic activity occurring during sleep. The dream can also be characterized as a specific form of expression through which the dreamer works on all the various problems occupying him or her during waking life. One of the earliest occurrences of dream interpretation goes back to ancient Sumerians in Babylonian civilization earlier than the 3rd millennium BCE. Most ancient writings, and until the Middle Age, associated dreams with the visitation of an external force which required the dreamer to take action or warned him or her of future events. These were the source of oneirobiology, the study of dreams, and oneirocriticism, the art of dream interpretation. In ancient Egypt, Bes was the guardian of sleep and dreams. In Greek antiquity, Morpheus was the guardian of divinatory dreams. Morpheus was thought as an ancestor of the visual arts, as he binds together shape and illusion in sleep. Greeks, like many ancient civilizations, channeled dreams in order to receive revelations through a process called incubation. At the temple of Asclepios, the god of medicine, the sick would sleep in the temple, hoping for therapeutic dreams and visions. In Judaism, dreams are considered as the voice of God and part of the experience of the world that can be interpreted and from which lessons can be garnered. Ancient Hebrews made a difference between good dreams from God and bad dreams from evil spirits. Christians mostly shared this belief until the Inquisition. Many Old Testament stories include divine revelations through dreams, such as Jacob's ladder. Glossaries, also called clés des songes, key to dreams, were common interpretation techniques based often on local and religious cultures. In the West, depiction of dreams in the arts long remained tied to biblical, divinatory, and religious narratives. And after the Enlightenment, this dimension was publicly discarded as charlatanism or witchcraft. But in private spheres, dream glossaries continued to be used. For art historian Thomas Schlesser, the 18th century is a turning point when it comes to dreaming and generating dreams. With the emergence of private spaces, oneirogeneity becomes an aesthetic and an ideal. It was associated to going beyond oneself to grow aesthetically, philosophically, and socially. Dreaming was an adult goal of betterment. Artists and writers of the 19th century saw dreaming as the queen of faculties, as said Baudelaire. And as Europe modernized, it appeared as a counterpart to a dehumanized world through mystic, poetic, or hallucinatory experiences. In the 19th and 20th century, Freud and Jung revolutionized the approach to the inner world by associating the dream with an expression of repressed desires, which deeply influenced a whole generation of artists, among which the Surrealists. But for Thomas Schlesser, the 20th century also brought about a distortion of this dream ideal. The oneirogenic imagination, destined to emancipating bodies and consciences, has perversely mutated into an oniric imagery dictating conception. While spiritual and traditional perceptions of dreams are still highly active, the 21st century saw the emergence of brain imaging technologies and discoveries in neurobiology, which further rationalize dream. Its nature, function, and content have been reconsidered by hard sciences as a cognitive phenomenon, a form of mental activity related to knowledge. The majority of dream sciences in the Western world today tackle the dream through a psychoanalytic or neurophysiologic prism, which investigates the dream's function, mostly. Still, the question of when, where, and how the dreams happen remains partly unanswered. Scientists have been able to more or less define dreams as a succession of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations that usually occur involuntarily in the mind during certain stages of sleep. During a typical lifespan, a person spends a total of about 6 years dreaming, and most dreams last only 5 to 20 minutes. One of the most well-known periods when dreams seem to happen is REM sleep, an acronym that stands for rapid eye movement, since it is a stage of sleep characterized by a high brain activity, while the body remains paralyzed. In spite of neuroimagery, which offered access into the brain activity during sleep, the subject's dream experience remained inaccessible. The dream can thus only be studied through dream accounts, a verbal or written report of the memory of the dream. The function and source of the dream remain a partial enigma, with several theories. The specificity of dream imagery, such as the distorted sense of time, the contraction of images and objects, and the complex narratives which fascinated artists and philosophers, have been partly explained, as caused and linked to the modification of the brain activity during sleep. As neurons fire up during our sleep, only some parts of the brain remain active, such as the pathway which generate visual imagery during our waking life. But the areas linked to logic and language remain mostly dormant. For people who are blind from birth, the dream contents is not visual, but it's related to other senses like hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting, whichever are present since birth. When it comes to the contemporary creation related to dreams, I will quote Daniel Bergès in the conclusion of his great book, Painting the Dream. The dream hasn't disappeared from contemporary creation. Rather, it has been assimilated and integrated into an aesthetic approach which borrows and draws inspiration from its indecision, its transversal ability to deconstruct limits between categories, limits between object and subject, interior and exterior, between the themes contained in the artwork and the pictorial treatment, between content and form. When it comes to the way artists approach these phenomena in an era of digitalization and greater accessibility to technology, I asked artist Justine Emard to tell us about her work. Justine Emard is an artist who has been diving into the subconscious and image emergence through installation blending frontier between the mind and the robotic. I discovered her work through a duo piece she realized in 2020 with Christine Armanger titled Dance Me Deep. This research project was around materializing the imprint of the dream in the brain through dream data live printed in 3D. The artist said about the piece that the dream becomes an architecture and appears in the succession of gesture of a robotic arm. The data is captured during the artist's sleep, during an encephalographic recording as well as other biosignals. The matter of the unconscious becomes an artistic gesture and revelator of the invisible. The physical matter becomes receptacle for the mental image of the dream. She allowed me to air an extract of the introduction of Dance Me Deep, recorded by Bell Radio.
Nos rêves sont à 90% composés d'éléments banals et ordinaires. Parler, échanger avec des personnes que nous connaissons. Et pourtant, les rêves qui nous frappent le plus comportent surtout des faits étranges ou dérangeants. Nous nous rappelons mieux de ces rêves, car leur bizarrerie nous marque, longtemps même après le réveil. C'est ce qu'on appelle les rêves typiques en psychanalyse. Perdre ses dents, être nu en public ou voler dans les airs. La source de nos rêves est complexe. Les rêves peuvent faire référence à notre journée, à nos ressentis, mais aussi à la représentation que nous avons du monde et à celle que nous renvoient les gens autour de nous. Il est important de souligner que le rêve est une activité cognitive, car c'est finalement une idée nouvelle. Jusqu'ici, les études sur le rêve visaient plus à y extraire une symbolique, un sens psychanalytique. Nous n'avions pas l'habitude d'y penser comme une forme d'activité mentale relevant de la connaissance, au même titre que la mémoire ou l'apprentissage. Mais c'est sûrement parce que le rêve semble impalpable et propre à chacun. La question qu'on se pose est, nos rêves sont-ils d'origine innée ou acquise?
And I asked her during a conversation to tell me more about her recent work and how she came to explore the territory of dreams through dialogues between human and machine.
Art and dreams always had been connected from the theory of the cave paintings until the surrealism. It's a tradition in art history to talk about the dreams, and dreams are at the origins of many inventions, especially in the scientific world. So life and dream is really connected. And I got really interested into dreams also because it's an image, a mental image. And in my work, I always get to the origin of images and their appearance, but also how the human appearance or the emotional projection can appear also on one object. I work a lot with robotics. And for me, one of the deepest unknown processes is also inside our brain, because it's unknown how those images appear from only like these electricity connections between the neurons. And it's so fascinating for me to see that they are an emotional process, but it's a kind of negative of our daily life. I always had strong dreams. And the last years I got really interested into neuroscience, that I started to also practice. For example, the lucid dream, which was a strong experience to really get this power of being able to control my dreams. My work revolves around the idea of exploring the new relationships between our existences and technologies, and I combine different images, technologies such as photography, video, virtual reality, performance in a flux around different fields. For example, robotic, neuroscience, organic life, and artificial intelligence. And I am interested in all the ways to simulate the reality. In my previous work, I work a lot with robotics around the question of the embodiment, how we can embody physical, mechanical body, how we can give a life to it, and how computing softwares can help us to recreate this super interesting phenomenon of being alive. So I collaborated a lot with scientists, for example in Japan, with the laboratories of Hiroshi Shiguro, Takashi Kegami's, who are super specialists of artificial life. And we always trying to ask, what is life? What is life? Is it like a movement? Is it a process? And to connect it with my practice around the brain, it's really something about our personal construction and how we build our life and our unique life and personality. What I like with dreams, it's always about the individual but collective experience. Everybody has always a dream or a thing to say about dream, and it's activating our very emotional part. It's an emotional process. And since 2020, I started to write down my dreams, to have this kind of diary and to reread them. And it's very much connected to what I see, what I hear, but also my personal emotions. It is a real process to process situations and to being able to react or to anticipate further situation. And it's very much connected to emotion and stress. And it's interesting when you start to dive into this kind of hidden part of yourself. My territory of work is around this kind of deformation between the perception and the reality, or how to simulate the perception of the reality. Also, the phenomenon of emergence is central in my practice, focusing on the idea of the appearance of new alterities. I'm interested in the vision through the eyes and through this process of perception, but also into the brain vision. How your brain is reconstructing something from the reality which is not the reality. I like this kind of unbalanced feeling in between the world, what you see, and what your brain wants you to see. And what I like in the fact of dreaming is that it's a natural process which happens every day, and where you are rebuilding a kind of movie. So for me, it's very connected to the field of cinema, art, and science. I would say that I create more displays and devices which are based on, most of the time, unsupervised deep learning experiment and around the idea of the human-machine dialogue. The last years into the neuroscience, there had been a lot of progresses and a lot of discoveries. And I always think my work in a kind of sensitive perspective of the present. Now I'm preparing some images from the brain that I'm reconstructing in 3D. So I work with practogrammetry to give a shape to waves. And it's a fascinating process, starting from a kind of bioorganic data that you captured on your brain, on your waves, and finally it's becoming an image in 3D. I like the process of giving a materiality to this very hidden phenomenon, and to start a research to dive around this idea of the origin of the image. So it's kind of core in my work to be able to leave the machine and the computer dream and to bring it where you want it to be. A robotic printing in 3D connected to a human brain It's something which creates a kind of friction between this idea of automatization and the idea of something which is totally invisible and that you cannot even sometimes remember, signal, an electricity, a particle that you will capture and which will have a physical appearance.
Today, neurosciences and psychoanalysis are one of the most pregnant approaches to dreams in Europe. Recent research has shown that a majority of the dreams we remember provoke negative emotions. Dreams have also been proven to be one of the spaces within which the mind can make sense of traumatic or problematic events, whether personal or collective. And in the midst of the COVID-19 lockdowns, an incredible surge in dream accounts happened worldwide. People flooding the social networks with vivid dreams accounts, nightmares, and existential questions. Several initiatives around the world strove to collect some of these dreams. And this renewed interest in the collective subconscious seemed to affirm the value of studying dreams in times of crisis, as they offer an untempered insight into how we, as humans, metabolize, adapt, and are changed by unsettling events. One of the main 20th century precedents of this nature was led by Charlotte Bérat during the Nazi regime. During the 1930s, this journalist living in Berlin began to collect the dreams of friends, relatives, colleagues relating to the Third Reich. It was later published as a book titled The Third Reich of Dreams. For the author, dream imagery might help us to understand the structure of a reality that was just on the verge of becoming a nightmare. In a book review by Frances Lang published in 2017, the authors described the beginning of the book as such. Bérat begins this extraordinary book with a dream from 3 days after Hitler seized power in 1933 and reported to her several weeks later. A factory owner in his 60s dreamed the following. Goebbels was visiting my factory. He had all the workers line up in 2 rows facing each other. I had to stand in the middle and raise my arm in the salute. It took me half an hour to get my arm up, inch by inch. Goebbels showed neither approval nor disapproval as he watched me struggle, as if it were a play. And when I finally managed to get my arm up, he said just 5 words. I don't want your salute. And then he turned around and went to the door. There I stood in my own factory, my arm raised, pilloried, right in the midst of my own people. I was only able to keep from collapsing by staring at his clubfoot as he limped out. And so I stood until I woke up. This dream haunted the manufacturer and recurred in different versions. One of the specificities of dreams is their involuntarity. They usually tell us a story freed from censorship, which reveals a lot about individual and collective mindsets. For Dr. Winnicott, the illusion holds an adaptive value, as do dreams and ultimately cultural activity, artistic creation. Dreaming is thought as a transitional space in which we can play with the relationship between inner and outer reality. But when under totalitarian regime, this freedom and transitional value seems to be destroyed, as dreams are invaded with the fear of oppression. As a matter of fact, a recurring element in these interviews she conducting was the fear of dreaming per se. Many were afraid to speak of their dreams openly. She had to copy the dreams in code, hide them in the binding of books, scattered in her home, and send them as letters to various people in countries abroad. To me, this makes us reevaluate the importance of dreams as spaces which resist injunctions, such as productivity or political correctness, a space of utter freedom of speech and experimentation. A much more contemporary enterprise was initiated by the London Psychology School Unit at the end of the second British confinement. As many people reported striking, disturbing, or unusually vivid dreams during the COVID pandemic, a few students founded the research project called Lockdown Dreams. In the same heritage line as Charlotte Bérat, they collected around 2,000 dreams in an attempt to later decrypt and analyze the impact of a pandemic on our dreams, hoping to better understand the way we individually and collectively cope with crisis. The student team and researchers presented some of the questions and findings of the research during a webinar, and they allowed me to air some of their findings. The team poses the theory that dreams that occur in times of crisis can tell us a lot about the mind's struggles to get to grips with a reality that dramatically impinge on the personal and private sphere, And if dreams are usually related to personal and private concerns, the identification of shared feelings across continents talks about shared experience. To identify those common elements, they started unwrapping the material collected by analyzing the dreamer's feelings upon waking, as well as identifying recurring vocabulary and imagery. A lot of the recurring emotional response included feeling confused or anxious. And the most recurring elements, as should be expected, included the word house, home, going away. The researchers started identifying elements which gave materiality to the invisible threat of COVID-19. Freud had said that what goes on within our internal life is not available to senses. It cannot be seen or touched. Anxiety has no shape or color, smell or sound. And for him, one of the only ways to approach the intrapsychic was through metaphors. Much like our subconscious, the corona is invisible and difficult to grab conceptually. It is thus represented through metaphors, through other shapes in our dreams, which also depends on individual vocabularies and experiences. But recurring elements represented the experience of coping as being faced or fighting against death, the plague, a toxic gas, water, zombies, or vampires. Common emotions were those of feeling trapped, wanting to travel and not being able to, being locked in, being controlled by the authorities, a feeling of self-surveillance, or having mixed feelings about social contact, both wanting and fearing them. The home took a specific omnipresence in the pandemic dreams. And the regression to childhood homes or the contact with dear deceased or estranged family members also appeared as a plausible coping mechanism of the mind seeking reassurance. Those dreams shed light on some of the common challenges that we all experienced since the beginning of this pandemic. The threat of mortality, the fear of economic hardship, the anger at leadership inadequacy, the loss of contact or the death of loved ones, the loss of freedoms. All of it making the subconscious feel exposed to the holes in the safety nets which we thought protected us. For French psychoanalyst Gérard Pavie, the anxiety-provoking climate wakes up in us fears rooted in childhood and adolescence. And for him, the dream allows us to reappropriate the fear and to allow us to retranscribe and integrate it into a narrative which gives it meaning. So those dreams not only inform us on our reality, but however negative, they also allow us to give form and cope better with what seems unthinkable, incomprehensible, impossible. For this piece titled Dream Bank, Gregory Chatonsky designed an artificial intelligence program and taught it to generate dreams from a database of 20,000 dreams testimonies collected at the University of California. These stories are then read and associated with images produced by an artificial neural network according to selected keywords. This piece is an incredible attempt to materialize the intangible neurological process that goes on within our brains. It creates an eerie atmosphere within which the visitor can watch the machine dream in real time. Here is an extract.
This life which is not ours and which crosses the bodies, knowing it or ignoring it, looking for a host, looking for the life of life. I am on a plane. I see my son sitting in a window seat. I try to think of where I am going to sit and I don't know where to sit. Then the doors open and a voice tells us to get out immediately. A stewardess tells me that we can catch another plane in a few hours. The airport is in a deep forest with big trees. I am afraid to fly. A big wind blows through the foliage. It is extremely strong. I want to scream and I don't show anything. Everything is burning down there. The animals run. It was inside me. I didn't notice it at first, then I felt my skin get warm. I woke up. A little girl, who I estimated to be 3 years old, was walking down the hospital hallway alone. I entered a room and an old man followed me in. He had a small black pear in his hand that he handed to me. He was talking about his 3 friends, now dead. His gaze was directed in my direction, but he wasn't really talking to me. He first apologized and then said, "It didn't look that bad." I replied despite his detached demeanor, "Okay, I'll have to give you the pair back, but it would be better if I kept it in hand for a while."
Here are some of the words of Gregory Chatonsky on this piece. There is no direct experience of the dream. Only the story remains. Thus, at the very moment when we get up terrified by the suffocation of sleep, we're not sure if we have dreamed what we remember. The first thing we think about is precisely the risk of forgetting this dream, proof that it exists only through the fragile memory. The latter could be a sign of something other than what it refers to. The shift between sleep and dream may very well be a disruption in the narrative regime. For example, a sensation is interpreted as a story with its causal sequences. The dream is not. There is only the story involving the enunciator and the listener. The one who tells puts such vivacity into his story, which nevertheless, when listened to, seems to collapse in its inconsistency. As for the listener, he or she is patient. He knows that his story must be expressed and must find its destination so that the changeover can finally be fully realized. If there is only a dream of memory, it is because the origin of the story remains uncertain. Hasn't the machine become the story of an existence that has dreamlike flavor? When machine can generate, thanks to statistical processing, from dream stories, new dreams illustrated by images themselves generated from an accumulation of past images, do we only produce a new way of dreaming, or even more deeply a new regime of opacity to our privatization, and therefore to its condition of possibilities? The transcendental imagination, the a priori ability of the experience to form images that are not mimetic, and that provide a pathway between intuition and understanding, consists precisely in this gap between the dream and its narrative. This allows us to define our anthropotechnological experience as eccentric positionality. The images of generative adversal network, GAN, have something of a dream and could remind us of a surrealist aesthetic. However, this one is involuntary, and as by default, marking by the same token an unexpected articulation between technology and dream, artificial dreams. If Gregory Chatonsky tackles the porosity between virtual and real of our contemporary daily lives through working on the dream, to feel like we are uncannily watching a process that goes on within our brains and to which we do not have access, he materializes the interface that the dream constitutes between real and virtual. His piece also becomes even more relevant in a context where we have become attuned to being faced daily with screens and images of ourselves. One of the disconcerting aspects of this time is our increased exposure to images of ourselves. Freud called it the uncanny. The question of internal sphere is deeply relevant when it comes to dreams. Evita Vasiljeva is a Latvian artist who creates site-specific installations that often include large, heavy sculpture. And in 2020, she arrived in Paris during the COVID-19 lockdown, and her working method was interrupted and she had to find new processes. So the bed became her studio, and she had bought canvas to use as sheets, and she started to catch dream fragments as she woke up. She was interested in this domestic in-between state and its frequencies. Evita exhibited the piece in 2 iterations these last years, one in Salon Normandie in a hotel room with a sound installation, and this summer during an exhibition at Fimanco Foundation after her residency. And she created Bedroom Bed, an exploration of the bed as a site, materializing invisible and subconscious elements that form the environment of our sleep cycles, such as the electric vein of the building, the sound which continually runs around us as we sleep, which fills the space, in echo to the brain waves producing the visions, which she gathered on the sheets folded on top of the beds. In a conversation recorded this summer, Evita shared how she started collecting dreams and how this daily practice brought her to exhibit pieces which she had never shown before. You will listen to an extract of one of the sound installations she made, and then she will tell you about her pieces.
It started, I think that during the first lockdown, the idea came to me, but I actually started working on it when I moved to Flamingo Foundation. It was a hot summer and I bought a new blanket to cover, like a very thin. It was cheaper to buy just a piece of canvas instead of actual blanket. It came suddenly, yeah, when I was covered with the canvas. And one morning I woke up and I realized, like, I'm kind of sleeping in a painting. Maybe I should just, I don't know, use it, and like spontaneously started to draw dreams on it in the morning. Yeah, it was just the moment of this between lockdowns, and because I came to France and I was kind of a bit trapped in these rooms, and I thought of, yeah, how can I continue art without having a studio? And I like as well that how these glimpses vanish. So as well, like every morning I would draw down on the blanket directly in the bed, sometimes outlines of what I remember, and during the day they kind of disappear from my mind. And by drawing, actually, sometimes I could remember what was around that dream, but mostly they would disappear quite fast. I always had very colorful dreams and super strong. I dream a lot. Yeah. I used to record more, I think, through the words, but this was the first time when I tried to record it through images. And it was actually very frustrating because it's in the morning, it feels like everything was important. Yeah, I wanted to see like material I was drawing with, like subjects that are coming to me, and places. So I started in Paris. I managed to go to Marseille and Riga. So in every city, I would buy a new piece of blanket and sleep during the time period I was there and draw. Yeah, to see if there are going to be different patterns in different cities, which I didn't find actually. I think that visually it still was really linked to the hand and still to the drawing, and they became very comical. Yeah, but I thought was just ball pen was the most direct way of depicting dreams, and it's less connected to painting, like the note taking. Yeah, I wanted to preserve this directness of action. If the drawing is ugly, it should say ugly. The frame was just the size of the sheet, but for the rest, I kept the freedom to depict sometimes something very small, something upside down. Next day, continue really like just based like how I feel that day, or there was no like strict structure to it. I wanted to keep it because I think dreams are kind of messy actually. Some tools actually started to vanish. I noticed. Ball pen, black and blue, I thought were actually staying the best. Also attached some photographies that I took during the period living in that particular city. Yeah, and actually attached them to the blanket, and I was sleeping in them, and I was very uncomfortable. I had to stop it because it was actually very stressful. I realized like I got really anxious. I couldn't sleep at night anymore, or I was just too stressed in the morning to wake up in order to kind of continue drawing. And I felt like dreaming is not anymore like pleasurable kind of action, but it felt like work. When I went to sleep, it felt for me like I'm going to work actually. Yeah, and then I didn't like that I became kind of too serious about it, and every morning would analyze like, okay, what does it mean? What does it mean to make a drawing or just a color field? Because when I work, I always kind of question too much and try to understand the depths of what's happening. And yeah, it became too serious. Like it was a battle between this what you say, this free space or feeling comfortable, and also again thinking like, what does it mean to become an art form? I think I definitely will come back. Yeah, I just sometimes need some breaks with some of works I do, like to digest and then find friendly terms with the work. in order to continue on a better foot. I really like this directness and that I can create wherever I go. I can just start up something without having a studio. I was really pleased about that. But I struggled how to present this work and its intimacy or this momentum. Yeah. So the first time I showed them, this was Hotel Normandy in Paris in this group exhibition. But it was a hotel context, so and within a hotel it was perfectly matching work. There was a bed already, and I actually continued drawing in the hotel while sleeping there. But later, when I wanted to present them again in Fiminko Foundation for an exhibition, the space was like so not intimate at all, and it's just a presentation space. And so I was thinking a lot like what bed means for me, like what is this place? So I actually worked in my studio of trying to figure out what's important about a bed. And I thought like, actually it's like a one person's room or something. It's like of a human body. It should be horizontal above the ground, a little bit levitating. And I made it from electrical cables as some sort of a net. I sort of like a net or weaving the slow process of flow. Like I see it like some sort of invisible current going through it, like a place where invisible source like forces go flow. Yeah. I guess as well I've been really inspired by Eva Hesse's piece Brain Waves. I think it was as well as a brain as like some sort of a wave or current. But and Fiminko, when I presented them the blankets, I folded them. I tried to use them like with a domestic approach, not to transform it too much as like the holy artwork, but this kind of that it's to try to keep this feeling that it's just domestic piece. It's coming from a domestic setup. Fridge was standing in the middle of the beds and created this electric hum when the fridge turns on and turns off. From one piece and then flow into next piece, and eventually I thought I wanted to create like a room set up but without having walls. So I imagined that what if it actually was someone's little house and what do I travel with because I moved so much around my mom, and then what's important for me is normally like a bed, normally a lamp. These devices I wanted to include for the sound, actually, to amplify. The fridge or the sound piece cannot stand alone. It needs like when you listen to sounds, in my opinion, I always personally want to put my eyes somewhere, and my eyes somewhere else. I always prefer if I also can hear something. But making sculptures, I always get upset that they're too silent. And I like to give them like a soundtrack, to call it like that. So on a different level. It's not just a sculpture, but it's also somehow bigger than that. Everyone could get their own like interpretation from the work. I like to keep them quite open. I think it's more about the moment of sleeping. It's more about the action itself. It's not so much of my personal dreaming. It's just more about this kind of state of mind or place. I think it's more about that. I think it was hard to define that piece for me for a really long time. I didn't know how to define. Decided at some point it shouldn't be defined. I heard some interest in this work again, but let's see. Some people really liked it, so I think I'm going to exhibit again sooner or later in some new condition. Then I'm again curious how I'm going to treat it with the space. It was just regarding the beds, blankets. It's the first time actually I exhibited drawings. I normally never show my scribbles. Actually, I was really shy or very kind of insecure about them because this frustration between, is this like a good painting or, but I decided for myself I shouldn't judge it as a painting. Give me freedom to do what I want without thinking it's about an art form, yeah. Or if I want to actually work more again on drawings. Yeah, this was kind of, for me, like a moment to allow myself to kind of, okay, I can do it. Yeah, I'm working on one project with this augmented reality, where like several artists are making piece in computer in 3D, and later it's going to be sent to the moon. I mean, like digitally. Yeah, but from this idea of, I think it's also such a dreamy idea. I'm creating several sculptures for this project and starting to think I'm going to have 2 big exhibitions next year in Latvia.
For Sigmund Freud, dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. To the process of interpretation, the manifest and sometimes bewildering content of dreams can be traced back to the unconscious representations underlying it. But can we understand dreams in another way by considering how the unconscious is structured by our social experiences? This is the hypothesis that underlies Bernard Lahire's recent book, The Sociological Interpretation of Dreams. So what do dreams tell us about the lives of individuals and societies which we live in? How are the social experiences of dreamers woven into the fabric of their imaginations, even during times where the intentional consciousness no longer controls the flows of images? Lahire apprehends the dreams at the intersection between the personal predisposition of the dreamer and their existential condition. The circumstances that gave rise to the dreaming and the symbolic framework of dream production is characterized by the suspension of ordinary social interaction, a weakened control over images, and the enactment of a dialogue of the self with the self. For him, dreams can be interpreted sociologically, and the dream is a symbolic arena freed from censorship. It conveys a message which can be interpreted scientifically when related to the social world of the dreamer and his concerns during waking life. He puts forward the theory that we replay at night the unconscious schemas and determinisms that structure our personality and underlie our behavior. For him, studying dreams enable us to discover our most deep-seated and hidden preoccupations and to understand the thought process that operate within us, beyond the reach of our volition. And if the social and cultural contexts have an impact on sleep and dreams, the political dimension of dreams is even more poignant when looking at oppressed or marginalized communities. Sleep deprivation, trauma, displacement have an impact on the life, the vocabulary, and the capacity to dream pleasantly, and the omnipresence of nightmares. Dream can appear as a space of utter freedom and resistance. They can give us an insight into how people deal with trauma and build their identities. In the United States, artist Chelsea Ray Klein spent 2 years traveling across the U.S. to investigate the stories, dreams, and traumas of LGBT veterans and servicemen. Chelsea's project includes an online interactive archive and artworks that explore largely invisible histories of queer American soldiers, based on interviews conducted by the artist. The project is titled Among Dreams, and it includes interviews, portraits, and a collection of dream accounts which the artist illustrated and composed in the form of collage. The artist reaffirms the value of tracing and mapping dreams along with our waking life stories to offer a complex perspective on the LGBTQI+ who serve their country. Here is their view on the project. Dreams fill and inform gaps in the conscious mind, asking what does the body remember? What is the residual and internalized impact of a story of forced hiding, silencing, and violence? What is the cost of war? How can we begin to heal? Klein's work shows us that even though trauma may mold the identity you have today, dreams can be the key to forging a sure, more authentic self. A lot of PTSD therapies today also include dream therapy, meaning recomposing images of traumatizing events through the dream to be able to relive them and to discard the side effects of trauma. A whole new trend of psychiatry takes into account the ethnological or sociological background. And a controversial approach to psychoanalysis, Toby Nathan, has approached patients through the prism of ethnography or anthropology. He wanted to integrate the cultural specificities of the individuals who were working with them on their psyche, dreams, and internal conflicts. This also meant approaching a different vocabulary than the one present in Europe, whether it be jinns, gods, representations of mystic or religious entities. He integrated the knowledge of different psychical constructions linked to cultural upbringings to tackle psychoanalysis and dreams. And in his formative years, he worked with a famous French ethnographer and sociologist called Georges Devereux. This researcher participated in an incredible movie confronting and creating a dialogue between two different perspectives on dreams. The movie is titled Psychothérapie d'un Indien des Plaines, Psychotherapy of an Indian of the Plains, a film created in 2013. In it, the Blackfoot people considered dreams predicted the future, whereas we think dreams shed light on our past. In this movie by Arnaud Desplechin, the French and Hungarian ethno-psychoanalyst Georges Devereux is called at the deathbed of a Native American traumatized by the Second World War and the slow disappearance of his people's civilization. Inspired by true events, in a research by Alessandro Casal titled Indigenous Dreams, Prophetic Nature, Spirituality and Survivance, the author dives into dream use for First Nation people and indigenous people of North and South America. Here is an extract from the research. Dreams are an important factor in several indigenous theories of knowledge and understanding, in that dreams act as a bridge between the physical world and a spiritual reality or an ancient knowledge. For some indigenous individuals, dreams have a spiritual significance and often have a metaphorical, literal, or prophetic meaning to the waking reality of human daily life. In the case of the Abenaki people, a First Nations people from the northeast region of North America, also called the Dawnland, the Abenaki population and culture were devastated by early European colonialism in North America. Their people still exist as a minority population in New England, Quebec, and the southern maritime provinces of Canada. The researcher had an opportunity to discuss with a few of them about the nature of dreaming. He found that despite the victimization of their people and culture faced with colonialism, their knowledge and traditions are often passed on through dreams by connections with their ancestors. Dreaming thus is a form of resistance and preservation of their cultural identity. Dreaming becomes a survivance, an effort to keep native tradition and history alive through stories, remembrance, persistence, and preservation of language. In 1999, anthropologist Sylvie Poiret said, "The study of dreams developed in a society where the theories and discourse on dreams negate their social use to focus on the psychic experience and the individual self would have only deemed the interest of dream study to be relative." As this discipline is slowly developing, artists also record some of the practices that open us to other cosmologies. Artists and filmmakers Vincent Moon and Priscilla Telmon created Collection Petites Planètes, an independent production company whose aim is to explore the boundaries between cinema, music, and expanded forms of modern-day rituals. A lot of their films record moments of trance and cultures in which altered states of consciousness have a predominant role. In a conversation, Vincent told me that their work around trance has a lot in common with dreamlike reality, and they also try to recreate this for the audience who sees the films through experiences of cinema healing. They recently work with a healer from the Mapuche community in the south of Chile called David Rain. The film is a part of a bigger project called El Proyecto Imaginario Mapuche, the Mapuche Imaginary Project, which will soon be released. Filming with various Mapuche leaders, artists, shamans, and communities over 10 days, the project celebrates the ancient and futuristic wisdom of a great indigenous culture of our planet, to create a unique site-specific performance as well as a documentary and archival basis for open-source research. Here is a small unreleased extract of the film, in which David Rain talks about the Mapuche myth of origin.
Kita pu penyi pu cacai pu temkeche. Tuain magalen mapumo lang mapumeo. Fulam temtain utanen tu mekenon. Tunten chikuifi tunten chipanto. Fi mongenmo pu laku pu chaski tema. Ne fui suin peu pues juelen acá. Con tu trenyi piñeki pu palme. Si yo tu mapui piñeki. Kpan mau kan pemika kini konata fayangan. Femeo dei konayangan pingeki. Konigan minche mapo. Minche la ken dor puingan ini kemuinangan. Utapui mawisa moyangan. Femo na puingi jatun semunagan. Ne painya yale watun semuyangan. Femo tpai kemun, femo tpai koyag. Epewan semu ki putsam kece. Yo tuluingan semua mau. Ina maita. Wei chan pe mapui paigan. Kemeta semui pe puyi mapui yangan ka. Pela como toi bueno ma so mo yangan tu mapui ke mo. Hui mu mli biam passageway. Ngien ko ngene nei lafken. Ngene nei la fe yi wichun ko. Tun tenchi ina mangan mali, wo ko mai mali, bueno ko mali. Chayen ko mali fe mo biam ngene nei passageway.
Vincent Moon described to me his role in the community as Peumatufe. The Peumatufe is the dreamer, the Mapuche person specialized in dream interpretation, which holds a great significance in traditional medicine. With the hybrid function of an oracle, guardian of knowledge, and storyteller, David announces events to come and visits and allow his community to both care for the stories of the past, the knowledge of the present, and to deal with future events. David lives in an accessible village in the south of Chile in the region of lakes. Mapuche people keep an actively poetic relationship to nature, and they talk to us about the porosity between human and non-human. Filmed in Cafalquén, Chile, his perspective shows the ongoing possibility of a realization of the dream to act in the material world. To end this deep dive into the dream territory, I want to reaffirm the interest of dream as a field of study, a transcultural and universal phenomenon which offers us a fluid approach to thinking and perceiving our world. I finish a little text that was sent by an artist, Camilla Salame, a Colombian artist that has been working a lot on dreams and identity. During my residency at the Site International des Arts, which ends in October, I am working on dreams as a personal and untranslatable experience. I'm interested in linguistic territories as identity territories. The fact that dreams are impossible to translate, because even if you're a lucid dreamer like me, you can remember a lot of things and sensations. But when you try to describe them through the spoken word, a lot of content and sensations, and even physical experiences of dreams are lost. In the installation which I'm preparing for my residency, entitled Moon Milk, I'm designing a space for the dreamer, a space for dreams. It is a small cabin in the middle of nature in which there is a bed and a small bedside table. The bed linen is hand-embroidered with words and symbols of protections for the dreamer from different cultures. On the bedside table, a ceramic book, a clé des songes without writing, its pages made of ceramic, are also empty, and are installed flying in the manner of our vanished dreams. In the cabin, a sound creation that mixes nature sounds with words and lullabies, childhood songs to chase away nightmares. I use my own voice to refer to that little voice that also appears in the lucid dreams. A projection is also used to light up the space. Then a ceramic mask of animal hybrid, tapir, tiger, elephant from 19th century Japanese mythology. This animal is called Baku. It is a nightmare eater. But if Baku is called too often, he will come and eat the dreams too. The nature of dream is indeed to fade away. In today's society, where sleep is sacrificed in the name of productivity, the place for dreams in daily life, this inner and personal communication with one's unconscious and memory, is almost non-existent. Since psychoanalysis has taken dreams in hostage in the West, we have somewhat forgotten the historical importance of dreams in the history of humanity, very much linked to rituals and myths.